Today we're joined by Monica Ospina and Rob Karpati from O-Trade. Monica is a corporate social responsibility and sustainability expert who employs an innovative approach to transform conflict into development and to turn human and social capital into valuable assets, improving the perception of mining and the well-being of communities across regions. Monica holds a master's degree in diplomatic studies from the University of Westminster and has completed postgraduate programs in sustainability management from Harvard University and international business strategy from the London School of Economics. Monica has helped create sustainable supply chain models and among other contributions to the IDC World Bank, participating in sustainable development goal conversation at the Rio+20 World Convention on Sustainable Development in 2012. This year, in 2020, she was recently awarded Distinguished Lecturer by the Canadian Institute of Mining, and she has focused on implementing CSR for geologists, investors, and community members in the resource industry. She's joined by Rob Karpati. Rob is the Strategic Transformation Officer for O-Trade. Rob has worked he's been a long-term finance leader in multinational corporate environment, and he focuses on strategic transformation and on global process optimization in his career, which has been more than 30 years in this industry. Rob's developed a capability for integrating complex end-to-end processes to bring together diverse stakeholders towards common perspectives and increase overall value. Rob has a strong belief in a balanced approach, valuing concept that sustainable development requires a win-win approach that engages various corporate and local community stakeholders in specifically aligned collaboration. Collaboration with long-term mutually equitable focus is critical to long-term development in his mind. And I think that Rob and Monica will be sharing some of this value production that can be gained by incorporating sustainable development goals in the mining sector and how this basically increases value for everybody, from the geologists to the investors and to the local community. So with that, I would like to welcome Monica Ospina and Rob Karpati from O-Trade. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Aaron, and thank you very much, Rob, for joining me on this. And I'm very happy that we are having this opportunity to share. Actually, you're going to be surprised how much common ground we have, social science and you guys. So not overdue, let's start with this. Our presentation today will be basically, we're going to be talking about measuring the benefit of social impact and much more attention to environmental, social, and governance, which is the entire world is paying attention to this due to COVID. Social is becoming on top of the agenda due to conflict. But we're going to be moving this to a bigger picture to integrate three key players here. You guys from the geology and geoscience, our understanding from social science, and finance world from Rob's side. So I'm sure we're going to find so much common ground when we do the analysis this way. Just very quickly to explain a little bit about who is O-Trade, because this is the thing I have to do always. What O-Trade is, we are a socioeconomic development firm, and our expertise is in designing and implementing solutions. The purpose of our work is to make it this productive for the industry as well as for communities. The demands of the industry are no different in terms of efficiencies as communities demand the same. And we want to build a bridge to make this work for everybody. That's basically our mandate and our goal. So let me just start from the very first point of trying to put both of us in the same ground when we go to the field. And probably this seemed familiar to you guys, and it is familiar for us. This is the story that we build in every single site around the world. When you guys go, and not many people really understand the value of the hard work of geology. And when I see these mountains, I always think that only you can find wealth and value here. And not many times we acknowledge how much your knowledge change and reshape regions and become the source of income of many people and become the future of many kids and become an opportunity to move out of poverty. These mountains not only represent what is development and technology and ended up in our cell phones or our houses, but much more represent an opportunity for everybody. And that's to give credit to you guys. You do that. But guess what? In social science, oh my God, sorry, here. In social science, when we walk the mountains and we walk these areas, we find human and social capital. So from our angle, when we go, we find families, human settlements, environment, kids, elders, culture, tradition, fear, skepticism, frustration, history, and many times the communities that we encounter are communities that sadly have been abandoned by their own governments. So they have learned to survive in their own way. And in some cases, they are very organized politically in their own culture. Sometimes they're not. And it's really when we encounter this reality that we have to work together with you guys. So on the other angle, you guys encounter an environment where it's mineral capital. So not many times we talk about social capital, human capital, and mineral capital, but this is the core of the business that we are in. And I will start walking you through the story of this picture. This picture, it could be very familiar for you. This is just getting samples, some sediments. And from the social angle, this picture starts the story of what does it mean to do it right. And in this picture, and I'm going to use it all the time, we're going to start talking about ESGs, environmental, social, and governance. Because when we start from the environmental perspective, having a group of geologists studying a region or working in a region means that there is a permit. Means that there is a responsibility around biodiversity. There's a recognition about the impact it could have. There is a recognition around water and what could be impacted when it's sediments is not, but for the fear of the world and communities is huge. And how we just calm that fear, how can we manage that stress? It just basically goes around most of the time around monitoring, around observing, around having regulatory authorities ensuring that this is a fair process. And at the same time, many times what we do is that we have communities monitoring what is happening. I will take you to the next slide that is about social. So in this picture, let me tell you a story that is fascinating. In order to have these guys working and getting sediments here, we are talking about a group of indigenous people, which means we are in indigenous territories. In order to be standing here, having no conflict and working together means that from the social angle, we have done an extensive work, number one, to obtain land access, ensure there is no conflict, ensure that we recognize the rights that the communities have on the land that they occupy. At the same time, we recognize that there are social impacts of foreigners and changing traditions. In so many times, communities have a very different economic activity, and now they have to start from scratch. Means that there is a willingness to work and make things clear. Means that we understand human rights and indigenous rights, and we treat it in a fair process, and we work on it. It's not just talking about them. It's just basically making clear that it's implemented, what is makes it valuable. We also understand that that it's important that everybody in the community knows what is happening and what are these guys going and what are they taking out of these rivers? How long does it process takes? Can I be part of this? Can I work here? Can I help you? Can I be a guide? Can you train me? Can you teach me how to do it? How can I be part of this? And that is when the social component comes in here. And when we can document, and finally what we obtain, that today everybody talks about the social license, which is basically an abstract concept coming from my angle. But the social license basically just summarizes that communities are okay to have you working in their field with no conflict. And that's what we want. We want a conflict-free environment where geology can do their science, which is a huge piece of research. So the next piece is governance, but governance comes far from the board of directors idea. The core value of governance comes in anti-corruption policies, very strong ethics in the company, because from here starts the set of values that will transpire and go straight to these communities and these indigenous that are in this picture working in their own land. It talks about transparency and make it very clear what is the stage of the project that we are. And it's no fear to tell the truth. That's when the social science come and help on building that dialogue. It's when we understand that there is corporate governance that is not far from being aware that the same truth that we want to tell the community should be told to shareholders. And they understand the risk of going to certain areas. And they also understand the time and doing it right represent a cost, represent an investment, and most importantly, represent an opportunity for everybody, for shareholders, for stakeholders, for communities, for governments, and for the future, for many industries that start with raw materials that come from the mining industry. So this is environmental, social, and governance. So how does it mean this social science in a technical approach? A few days ago, I had a conversation with one of many of geologists that are brilliant in the industry. And he was saying, Monica, you know, it is critical that we understand the technical approach. So I decided to borrow his words and try to put it here, what is the technical approach to building trust and the technical approach to the social license. We have 4 key elements that from the geoscience perspective might sound very abstract. From the social science perspective, it is pure what we do. At the end of the road, we collect data as you guys do. At the end of the road, we also want to make sure that we can work in these regions. So it's nothing different than that. You guys work and study rocks. We work and study communities. A good friend of mine, a geologist, says, Monica, I'm grateful with my rocks because they wait for me and they never complain. I'm grateful with my people and my end because I learn from them every day. So social management system is just simply how we organize ourselves to work around the communities in the social environment where we are. The stakeholder engagement just let us know who they are, how they work, how they organize, what are their culture and values, and it's our duty to accommodate around that. Understanding and studying needs and capacities allowed us to bring assertive solutions. And collaboration, it just means that we can act together. The pictures that we are sharing here are pictures of our own work. And I love these particular pictures because the community is working really hard to help us building something for the project. But the best part of the picture is that if you see ladies, and the best part of the picture that tells you that it's trust and the social license is the smile in their face. That is what is return of investment from the social angle. But there is bigger picture than this. And now I'm gonna engage and invite Rob to continue the story here. So why we measure the benefits of social engagement, Rob? What does it mean from the financial angle?
Thank you very much, Monica. And thank you very much, guys, for giving us the chance to talk about this because it's an important topic and it's a great fit with the starting point, which is the great value that geology creates, the wealth that's pulled out of the ground that we use to run our world at the end of the day. So what we're talking about before we get into numbers or finance, it's what does it mean two sciences commingling to make 2 + 2 = 5? So geology is a science, of course. It's about taking something out of the ground. It's about making it ready for use in whatever equipment or toys or whatever else that we need. Social science, along with that, is about the people side. It's about the things Monica talked about. Social engagement. What does that mean? Stakeholder engagement, understanding who we're talking to, understanding their wants, needs, fears, things that matter to them, and how can a company work with the community to obtain a social license to operate. Double speak for trust. So the notion of trust that drives collaboration so folks can work together. And you know, in the age of COVID these days, trust's all more important because look at all the shutdowns in March and look at the things that came up earlier. It's where a social license to operate had been obtained, where the work had been done, where the trust has been there. So it's 2 + 2 = 5 by combining the two sciences at the end of the day. Where finance comes into the mix, so why measure? It's about measuring and guiding are 2 different things. Measuring is, well, how well are we doing? How well do we think we're going to do? Guiding is what can we do better? What can we change? What should we focus on? And how does that make sense? It's the stuff that finance people know how to do. It's the stuff that finance people do every day in developing and disseminating business cases. It's putting together the full picture of wealth, the full picture of value, how does the end-to-end connect, and how does it monetize? So, you know, we've all heard the phrase follow the money, and that's what it's about at the end of the day. That highlights the interplay of geology and social engagement, if you can please. So before talking about what we're measuring and how, at a real basic level, there's the why. And there's a couple of things. Follow the money. Investors care. So why do they care? Because one is they understand there's money to be had here. Investors care about risk. Investors care about return. They know that there's community social opportunities to collaborate, to make more money, to lower the bar on risk. They also know ethically it's the right thing to do. It's treating people with respect, dignity. It's taking the value and wealth generated through geology and finding a way to pull in the community and work together towards a common win-win approach. The other side of value is everyone on the line. So geologists, someone running a mining company wants an operation to be as good as can be, as profitable, as much throughput, so on. So part of that's the community. It's the notion of measuring to demonstrate value add and to redirect if and when need be, so that we get the biggest bang out of the buck for the work that we're doing. So at the end of the day, it's 2 + 2 = 5. That's what I'll keep going back to, because geology and social engagement, creating something that's greater than the sum of the two components, if you please. So investors have been thinking about this for a long time and transforming the way they've been thinking about it for a long time. Because we go back 20 years ago and we have what I'll call the traditional investor. So someone wants to make money, all the power to them. It's a good thing. And they think about risk, they think about return. Those are the folks that have driven the economy over decades and actually centuries, thinking about risk and return. But the idea of what happens outside of the four walls of the shareholder wasn't always central to the mix. And that's what's been changing the last couple of decades. First step in that transformation are ethical investors. So the notion of let's think about risk, let's think about return. Yeah, we all want to do well, but let's not do harm either. So ethical investor might be someone who says, I'm not going to invest in a cigarette company or in a gun manufacturer because they're contrary to my personal ethics, and the idea of not wanting to do harm is part of what I'm about. So that's real different than the pure risk and return, because all of a sudden it's exclusionary. That's evolved into ESG investors. And ESG investors aren't really exclusionary, they're inclusionary. It's the idea of let's think about risk and return, but let's do some good here as well, social or environmental good. And what does that mean? It means improving the environment, making something better. It means improving people's lives, making something better on the social side. But it's based on qualitative data. It's the work that companies do, signifying that something's happening that's hopefully going to lead to a good result. It's not showing the numbers, it's not showing the true impact of the result, but it's really trying to do good at the end of the day, along with wealth. So the latest version is called impact investment. And impact investors are growing real fast. They're the way of the future, because there's risk, there's return, there's doing well and doing good, and measuring the doing good. It's quantitative data. How do we know we're improving social? Show me the numbers. Let's analyze it. Let's crunch the numbers, see what it means. How do we know we've done something right with the environment? Let's look at some numbers. Let's crunch them. Let's see what it means. And let's hold ourselves accountable to doing right along with doing well. So it still starts with, look, everyone wants to make money. Natural, makes sense, right thing to do. But it's dialing in that there's a big wide world out there beyond the four walls of the shareholder. So the trends that go with all of that, this notion of social return on investment, it's for the social investment up front, What does it mean? What's being generated? We spend $1 or $1 million to improve something. Do we generate $10 or $10 million? Well, hopefully more than we spend. That's the point. We can measure it. We can understand it. It's understanding the impact of this on a company, because it's, getting along with the community, a mind working with its community and collaborating in a conflict-free way means less risk. It means more collaboration. It means more synergy towards bottom line, which is pretty cool because everyone gets to win. And it also means reporting approaches. And there's scads of these, and they give me a headache because they're all a little bit different in saying, but they're all getting at the same thing. But converging reporting, a common standard that we're going to look at impact based on, that we're going to look at ESG based on. That's where we're evolving to. And in the next few years, we're going to gradually get there. And that's going to mean something to each and every mining company and each and every company in other industries as well, because it's accommodating those standards and using those standards to optimize ourselves. So it's a busy chart. But what are we talking about measuring? It's not as scary as it sounds, as it looks. So there's a couple of points of view. There's a corporate, there's a community, and there's an investor point of view on what are we measuring. Corporate means, what does it mean to the company? The financial statements, the books and records of a given mining operation, let's say. From a community point of view, what does it mean to the community on the ground? How are we improving their lives by collaborating with them? And from an investor point of view, how do those two things come together? What's the bang for the buck? So with improved earnings, with lower risk, with improved community touch and benefit. So on the earnings side, on the corporate side, there's a couple of main chunks to the work. One, and it's easiest to get our heads around, it's about risk reduction. So getting along, collaborating, building trust with the community that surrounds our mine. What does that mean? It means there's less risk of conflict. Conflict goes away. We're conflict free. So what does that add up to? Well, opportunity cost is reduced because all of a sudden there's less risk of shutdown because of conflict. So if there's a mining operation that's, I'll make it up, has $50 million a month of material pulled out of the ground, if it's shut down for a month because of conflict, that's $50 million gone. And maybe later, years down the road, we'll catch up, maybe not, but for today's purpose, it's gone. So that risk is eliminated when we get along with the community, when we collaborate with the community. Risk of other kind of conflicts that can destroy capital, equipment being destroyed, lawsuits. All of a sudden, there's the ombudsman process in Canada. So let's say there can be a legal challenge from a community that a mining operation isn't engaging a community the way they'd like it to, or for an employee of the mine saying that the engagement isn't up to scratch. So all of a sudden, there's a legal process. Sounds like a distraction. Sounds like a whole bunch of money out the door while we're thinking about dealing with that noise. Reputational risk. So I don't know if all of a sudden we dig somewhere where there's, let's say, an Aboriginal historic site, and there's an impact from that, and it ends up in the newspapers. Sounds like a costly venture to fix our reputation and to manage the reputational impact. So there's a whole bunch of sides to risk. Permits, for that matter. So are we going to get permits if a company has a history of issues with communities? Well, maybe, but it might be harder. It might take longer, or maybe not, which is even worse. So along with all this risk, there's opportunity. And opportunity is all about collaboration. Who knows the local ground better than the local people? Who knows local procurement, local businesses, local lay of the land stuff than local people? So being able to pick at their brains, being able to work together to figure out how to go after things the best way, all of a sudden adds huge value that no one can individually see. Because a geologist brings the fantastic science, but might not have the local community knowledge. Local community might not have the geology knowledge, of course, but you put the two together, bang, some good ideas get lifted up. So all of that ends up sussing out to net present value. Companies make more money, less risk, more opportunity. Community is a different story. So obviously that's not the books of the company, but it's really, what does it mean for the people in the community? So what's improved water access? What's improved education access, roads, infrastructure? Everything means something different, but it's improving lives and it can be monetized. So finance people know how to think about monetizing this stuff and dialing it into social return on investment calculations. There's even something called the Global Value Exchange. It's a database of 30,000 different metrics. What does it mean to improve water access in this community or that country or education in another place? And they've got metrics to help guide value calculations around that, which we can use to figure out how much bang for the buck there is for the social investment we're doing. And along with that, there's the concrete, the core economic benefit that goes with this: employment, local procurement, buying something from the local community or hiring them, where obviously the value goes straight into the community, along with the more generic, the broader things like water or education. So investors are paying attention. They don't have their own separate calculation. They have both. They want a return on investment. They want reduce risk. They want to do the right thing. They want a good result coming from doing the right thing. So they're paying more and more attention to both as they drive the bus on investment decisions. So if you can please. So finance people, you know, the last chart had a lot of words and talked about it for a few minutes. This is what finance people do every day. They know how to build business cases. And there's some principles, protocols, approaches finance uses all the time. So materiality. So what matters? Where's the bang for the buck? Well, that's what we ought to focus on. And thinking about the reporting groups like SASB, the Sustainable Accounting Standards Board, or GRI, they've got sector-specific materiality. What matters for mining? And how do we think about it in a country and in our industry? And how does that come together? It's a natural focus area for these business cases. Relevance. So, okay, engaging a community does lots of things. It builds collaboration, it adds value. It's not going to change the price of a commodity, though. So let's not include things that aren't part of our work in our calculations, because we'd all love the price of our commodity to go from 1x to 3x, because there's a run on it, it increases. But that's not going to happen from this work. That's other work. Reliability, and reasonability is probably the other word that goes with that, is all about common sense test, making sure that the logic of a business case comes together. You can look in a mirror and say, it makes sense. Reliability, it can be recreated. Someone else would come to the same conclusions, to the same assumptions, a reasonable person. And conservatism is the last one. And conservatism in this context means we're not going to solve world hunger. We're going to add wealth here. We're going to add value here, but we're not going to solve world hunger. So let's look in the mirror and be honest with ourselves and with our stakeholders around what we're going to do, what we're not going to do, and do what we say what we do. From an approaches point of view, again, it's the stuff finance people live and breathe. Probabilities. So what's the likely outcome? So if we do this, what's likely going to happen? What's the best case? What's the worst case? What's the probability range? Let's think about it. The inherent risk, the inherent opportunity in a time-bound way. What time-bound means is, well, useful life of project this year, next year. Useful life through closure of a mine. What does it mean? And what does it mean chunk by chunk as we get there? And causes and effects, meaning what do our actions trigger? We do this, someone else does that. The community reacts a certain way. How does it all come together in an overall model that can be monetized, that can be used to help make sure we're doing the right thing, generating the effect that we're looking for? So bottom line, it's just what finance people do. So you add it all up, it starts with what Monica was talking about. It's sciences working together. It's geology, the huge value of that. It's social science. It's doing the right things. It's doing them profitably. Two sciences working together, building win-wins. So win-win meaning the company makes more money, the community does well, investors do well. It's the right answer for everyone. Social return on investment, measuring in a concrete way, data-based way, supportable way, what the result's going to be on the community, along with what the result's going to be for the company, for that matter, of conflict-free mining. Because measuring and validating impacts is what this is all about, all the different views, so that we can see that we're doing the right thing. We can adjust if we're learning something that, whoa, maybe we ought to tweak a little bit and that'll be a better answer, and then learn as we go along to optimize. So that's the overall story. So we'd like to open it up for conversations, questions, comments, and we can see where we're going the rest of the hour. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, guys. That was really good. I think we're going to have a very interesting discussion.
Yeah, no, thank you both, Monica and Rob. That was a really good introduction, I think, for probably a lot of people here about what exactly is at play on the investor side and on the corporate side, and how that interacts with the community. And understanding a little bit of where we fit into that is I mean, it's critical, right? I'd like to go ahead and just get to asking. Sandra has a question, and Sandra, if you'd like to unmute yourself, I think it would be great, awesome if you could ask Rob and Monica directly your question.
Oh, thank you. My question is kind of simple, I think. Who does that work for reaching the community? Meaning, when you just when you first do mineral exploration, it's from what I understood, it's desirable to start reaching the community. Who does that work? Are the geologists? Does people get training for that? How that works?
Well, that is thank you very much for your question, and that is a critical question. Normally and traditionally, geologists are the ones who put the foot on the ground for the first time, and they start building that relation with locals. And in so many cases, they are successful in obtaining land access and getting access to sample the area. The new proposed model around responsible mining and even more early stakeholder engagement, it just goes that somebody within the company that it takes care of community relations, it starts the process. And from my very own experience, I can tell you that it becomes very efficient. It sounds costly for many companies and mostly juniors, but it is very efficient and on time, as Rob was explaining, having both working together become a better return of investment. When a community relations person with the expertise and knowledge in social management starts the land access process, it's not only that will allow geologists to concentrate in the work that they have to, it's a lot already that you guys have to do in terms of collecting samples and collecting data and organizing all of this, but it speeds up the process for you. Communities can take long time to give land access, or conversations can take long. And when you just place a geologist in that role, number one, in many cases is frustrating. And in some cases, we talk different languages. So community gatherings can take 5 to 6 hours. A geologist, from all the ones that I know, who are amazing, sometimes they get like, okay, these guys are not going to the point. So ideally, should be somebody in social science start and paving the road, getting the agreements with the communities and getting the approval for land access. And once that is ready, the whole apparatus start working, because geologists will have access to crews, people working with them, no conflict in accessing areas, just simply go straight to do their job. That will be the ideal scenarios. And actually we are moving towards that worldwide. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome, thank you.
We have a question from Tom. Tom, would you like to unmute yourself and ask it yourself?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. Thanks, Monica and Rob. That was great. So my question is kind of also thinking back to the podcast you did on discovery to recovery. A lot of these ideas of building social license from the first moment you're on the ground seem really obvious to me, especially when you look around the world and see lots of projects stalled from these social issues. But how many companies are actually taking up these ideas, and are the kinds of things you talk about becoming standard practice, or are you operating in a vacuum?
Well, that's a very good point. Thank you, Tom, for your question. It's becoming a trend because, as you just said, social conflict is escalating. And the case of COVID is just putting more stress on social. And the main reason is because governments are not doing the job in addressing the needs of communities. Communities through democracy have learned that worldwide that they have a power in their voice and they have a power as occupants of the land. Regarding the fact that a company get concessions and have rights to do studies on the underground, we have never forget that occupants on the land, without their approval, you don't have a project. And that is as simple as it sounds, but in the industry worldwide, sometimes we forget that the occupants have a right. And in that order, companies that are aware of this, they're very proactive in moving towards engaging the social science and start working with social science, as I answered before. When you understand this dynamic and recognize that you have rights on the underground, that communities on top have rights on the ground, and in many cases, sadly, the government just moves out of the equation. So you are dealing directly with the communities. So if you understand that, you will be in the today and the future of the mining industry. If you're still thinking that communities will do because you are there, that is when conflict starts. That's when we don't see projects to be successful progressing in later, and investors just running away because it's too much risk. Rob, you want to say something about it?
Thanks. Yeah. What Monica said is exactly why investors are getting more and more engaged as well, because investors understand both the risk and the opportunity. They understand why it makes sense to do this work and how they're going to end up doing better as a result of it.
Yeah, and we need to acknowledge that, and one of the things that is interesting is that mining is the oldest industry besides agriculture. Mining is not going to disappear, agriculture is not going to disappear because it just addresses the needs of human nature. But both agriculture and mining can be a source of conflict when we ignore that people settled there have rights. And that's when the whole conflict starts. And unfortunately, I don't know why the industry for many years have ignored that. And that's when really investors are looking right now in terms of impact. And at the same time, I find that it's critically important that geologists recognize the value of your work to society, not only to science, the value that you bring when you bring wealth to a region. That is enormous. And that is something that I hope today we just build that awareness and make you proud, guys, for the work that you do.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. I have a question. I think it was last week, a really big mining project here in Chile called Pascualama that was owned by Barrick Gold was shut down for good. It's a very controversial project that had a lot of community issues and also environmental issues. I think my question is, I don't know if that project specifically, but is there a way of making things better when companies have not done a good job for a while? Like, is there a way, is there like a turning point? Or once you screwed up, it's done?
Well, Irene, thank you so much for your question. It will be kind of the same question if we say, I will use my analogies, like you had the best boyfriend in the world, but you cheated. Is it a chance that the guy want to marry you? It's a lot of work in terms of reputation to build that back. And in the case of Barrick, it's a huge work that they have to do in front. Unfortunately, it's a lot of failures in the engagement process. And that goes back to Tom's question about if companies are really understanding this. And I don't think so. I think that companies that and I will be very clear and fair here. The people that I met in the industry who are more social sensitive are geologists, but not many geologists are running the industry. So that's when we lose that understanding of that human side. Geologists drink the water, the community drink, eat the food the community eat, sleep in the houses the community sleep, and understand the challenges the community face. And that is when it just jumped to another side. And interesting enough, the case of Pascualama is the largest player, failure in the process, not a good engagement process, and shouldn't be for a large player as Barrick. The same case as Rio Tinto. I mean, it shouldn't never happen to a company as Rio Tinto, what happened in Australia. So it doesn't, I mean, one thing clear, that message that is that doing it right doesn't mean that you are the bigger company, you do it right. It's not a size, it's the quality. The quality in understanding. It's the same as for you guys. The quality in understanding and reading the geophysics and all the studies that you do is the quality of your work that defines the quality of the companies. And hopefully the boyfriend wants to marry the girl after.
Change management is one of those phrases bandied about in the corporate world. And a lot of people say it, few understand it. But at the end of the day, change management's about people. It's about trust. It's about listening as well as talking. And listening's hard, but without listening, trust can't possibly be built because it's a starting point. And to your point with the great question, once trust is broken, it's pretty hard to get it back. But if you listen a whole lot, then and do the right things, hard is different from impossible. As long as folks keep in mind that it's about people at the end of the day, which is natural for geologists because it's really what they do anyway. Like Monica said, being in the community, drinking the water and eating the food, talking to the people.
Yeah, and actually, we put it in perspective, Rob. I would like to ask you on that and expand on Irene's question. Takes shorter period of time to do a good engagement process and building trust than working on reputation. It was very expensive reputation from the financial angle.
Absolutely. Once you're at a bad place, there's an outtake of money like there's no tomorrow. Because at the end of the day, like Rio Tinto, that's a costly thing. Like the shutdown with Barrick, that's a costly thing. It takes real work to come back, and real work the next time there's a land permit need and a new engagement, because people remember the last problem, because that's what people do. So the economics are pretty natural, that there's integrate up front and integrate in a straightforward way, because it's part of the overall work, or go over the top later, which is wildly costly as far as risks coming true, plus the work to recover, which is a whole lot harder than it would have been if it wouldn't have been done up front.
Yeah, it's so true. And the thing on reputation is that the best reputation for exploration or mining company is not being in the news. That tells how good it is. Thank you, Irene. Thank you for your question. Good question.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you both. I would like to follow up on Irene's question, because with you both as sort of looking at the investment and community side, and you see these giant catastrophes that happen even in oil and other extractive industry, like the deep horizon drilling oil spill in the 2000s. What is the difference between a company, for example, like BP throwing a lot of money at this problem, a lot of advertising for reputation, versus groundwork? Like, what can they do? What can a company do? Is it better to throw money at a problem to a community, to who would that go? And if that's not the best way, what is the best way?
Throwing money is wasting money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
gets the community is very upset too.
Yeah, like it's listening to people, engaging people, understanding people, and then collaborating with people to jointly come to consensus around what makes sense. What does collaboration look like? Throwing money, especially to deal with some reputational problem, it might as well just burn money.
Yeah, I would like to add something here and make it very clear for everybody. Mining industry, what we sell to the markets as raw materials and commodities is not Coca-Cola. So we don't sell Coca-Cola, we don't put that. Why most of the cases that throw companies away are not related to the work that you guys do in terms of geoscience, unless was the horrible case of what was the case that this that even was a movie? That started the 43101. Brilliant. Except of that, which is all one in history. But most of the time you see companies going down the road because social or poorly financed. But you don't see much noise made around the work that you do, which means goes back to what I'm saying, that good reputation for a mining company exploration means that these guys are not getting attention in the news because there are no wrongdoings on that. And we forget that. We think that we have to be Coca-Cola, that everybody needs to talk about that. No, we are not Coca-Cola. The other thing here is that when a company does poorly and wants to invest lots of money and throw money on trying to fix reputation, it just tells you a poor management. It's just not even geologists involved in this. It's just a poor management. Because from day one, you didn't understand that you have to work with occupants of the land, regardless if it's indigenous, regardless if it's a community, if it's Caucasians, Blacks. That's not the point. You need to understand that when you're dealing with communities, you recognize that they are occupants and you have to work with them. It sounds repetitive, why collaboration comes into place, but working with is the only way companies can go further. When you bring and try to throw lots of money because now I did so bad and I'm gonna put all of this, you just simply get angry in the community. Why? You didn't invest the money that was needed to improve water systems that are not here. You didn't invest the money in engaging us and allow us to learn how to do the job and work with you. Now you're throwing money in advertising and public relations, in people that don't even understand us. It just simply creates a bigger and bigger gap in terms of understanding. So good management in mining comes in understanding that we both go together. And that's why when we were thinking in the presentation, I decided that sharing a video, and the video that you saw is our own footage of our own work when we were working on an early engagement project and try to understand how many settlements are in the region where the exploration is going to happen. And knowing that those settlements, having the green light from those settlements, represent the opportunity for geologists to start getting samples. And that's when the project starts. And we go together. That's good management, that's good practices, and investors happy to throw money, and you don't waste money in sending flowers to the other side because it's not gonna get married to you. That's a fact.
Thanks, Monica. Yeah, I guess you're right. Like flowers to the other guy, or a boatload of commercials on TV don't do that much when
No. Probably flowers for a funeral. But
yeah. I'd like to go to our next question. Maria Alejandra, if you want to unmute yourself, you can ask your question directly to Monica and Rob.
Hi, Monica and Rob. Thank you very much for the presentation. My name is Maria Alejandra, and I am from Colombia, so that's why I just wanted to ask, if you could build a little bit more on your work on La Colosa project and how your work impacted like the final decisions on how this project has evolved in the past decade. Thank you.
Wow. Hi, Maria Alejandra. Happy to find another Colombian. I'm also from Colombia. And you touched on a project that we were called too late to help. And I always have that little piece sad in my career, because when we were called by Global Ashanti, sadly, I had to tell my good friend, it's too late. La Colosa project in Colombia, for people who are not familiar, was owned by Global Ashanti. And they identify an area in Cajamarca in Colombia with a good potential of a gold deposit. I understand it's a very important potential for not only for the region, but for the country that really needs to move forward out of violence and conflict. And the case here is precisely the case of a Coca-Cola that I was mentioning before. Geology did extraordinary work. Environmental did an extraordinary work. The work that I saw on how they were just working around the platforms for drilling was just something spectacular. Even they did a full understanding of biodiversity in the region and inventories that allowed them to protect the species when they were doing sampling and drilling. Not many projects like that I have seen in my career, and I would say I have seen few, but this one has been quite something. But nothing of this work was clearly explained or fully engaged with the authorities. There is number one. Number two, local communities at the grassroots levels were engaged and they were part of the project. That was something that was very well done. Sadly, here we are in front of two issues. The political issue that unfortunately the politicians in the region in this particular was kind of not very much engaged in be part of the project. There was no interest. You have another front that was a conflict between agriculture and a lot of power in the country that was saw mining as a threat, because in this case, Ashanti was paying fair prices, fair salaries to people working in the region, and it become an issue. And it becomes a failure in engaging all stakeholders and education at all levels. That is one of the saddest cases, because it not only reduced the possibilities for the country that needed. I met with many local stakeholders, families who were really keen to be part, but unfortunately they couldn't, and some of them they were. So it was a combination of failure, not in the geology, and that's what goes connected with the previous answers, not to the geology, not to the environmental. Social was not that good, and engagement with other places and education was critical in a country that knows more about conflict and development. That's the sad story for Ashanti. Hope that answers your question, Maria Alejandra, somehow.
Thank you, Monica. Yeah, I can imagine there's a lot of really bad cases around the world. I guess we already mentioned a couple, but I'm really happy that I think we're all happy that companies like you guys are getting more and more involved in mining projects. So we have another question from Alana. Alana, do you want to ask it yourself? Want to unmute yourself?
Thanks, Irene. This is one from Tom.
Sorry. I'm staying over at Alana as well in Switzerland. So my short question was whether lumping environment, social, and governance together actually helps or hinders your work. Because, I mean, as you showed, it takes different people to address these issues in the field, and it takes totally different metrics to evaluate them for the investor. Any comment?
There are different experts for sure, and there are different metrics for sure. but the reason they tend to get combined is they interrelate. So if a company does a great job with social, by definition, it'll think about environmental as well, and it'll have the governance structure in place to manage both in an ethical way. Vice versa, if there's a strong focus on environmental, by definition, that tends to include social engagement, and again, with the strong governance structure. So they're different for sure, but they tend to go together in terms of intersection points, as well as in terms of overall corporate strategy to maximize bang for the buck.
Yeah, and I totally agree with Rob on this. And one point that we need to be clear is that good governance starts from the top and is evaluated at the grassroots. And companies also forget that. If a company has a board of directors of management that really understands transparency, transparency will be seen in environmental when you have communities monitoring water systems and water and the use of water. And transparency will be seen and everybody receive the same pay, regardless if you work in this community or the other community, regardless you want communities to know what is happening. And transparency translates to the very bottom. And at the end, the bottom up will be, I give you the social license because I trust you. So it is an integrated approach, and that is basically what you want. And goes back to what we were saying before. When managers and leaders in companies understand that all of these elements are part of keeping a long-term project, everybody has a project and the community wants a project. And keep that in mind. I mean, communities, they want the long-term. Please, that's jobs, that's stability, that's being out of poverty, that is peace of mind. And that is as a basic human need, we want that peace of mind. All of us, we want that peace of mind. And it's nothing different for them. At the same time, we have fear, and they fear when they don't see a company that they can trust. And that's a start from management. So let's have good management leading mining companies.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Ray.
Thanks. I'm actually interested in one of the words you said there is that it starts from the grassroots and having communities monitor their water supply, etc., monitoring the quality of the job that the mining company is doing. I guess I'm curious as to how that moves from the grassroots community level to the government level, and what the government role should be, and what sort of controls and balances, what sort of ESG like reporting, like you talked about the homogenization of this, but like who's in charge, or how can we better make sure that the rules are being followed?
Wow, $1 million question.
At a real basic level, governance starts with do what you say what you do, and measure it, prove it. And we live in a shrinking world. We live in a world where everyone has a smartphone, where everything ends up on Facebook somewhere, where everything ends up out and about. So yesterday's or 50 years ago, secrecy is today's transparency. So the notion of dialing in a culture as well as a process that ethically does what you say and measures that is really a pretty basic starting point. And it's really why in a shrinking world, by definition, communities are going to have a say in what you've really done versus what you've said you're going to do. And if they're different, word will get out, because there are just so many channels for it to get out that are out there.
Yeah, and to the part of the question about governments, there is, should be and must be a role of the government here as number one, government granted concessions. So they have a responsibility with the concessionary, with the company, the private sector, and they have a huge responsibility with the people, their own people. Sadly, we are seeing that worldwide governments are failing in address the private sector and the needs of their own people, which leaves us face-to-face communities and companies working together and create their own governance body and their own rules of how they're going to operate. Governments that are active in participating, they are participating from the frameworks, for the policy frameworks that allows companies to understand what are the guidance on what it should expect. For example, the consultation processes for indigenous, that should be a framework defined by the governments. And communities should be informed by the governments about what to expect in the regions. Said, okay, we are expecting to concession this area because it's a potential of minerals. So it won't be surprised for you that you see companies that will come to do sampling and exploration and so on. But suddenly the governments are just failing in doing their job and leaving that nightmare to both of us. So somehow the private sector has to jump and fill the role of the government. And not only in terms of what we're saying in informing communities. In our practice at O-Trade, we have seen many times that we come and feel that shoes because nobody has told these communities that some activity is going to happen in the region. And happens that I'm the private sector and I'm telling you. And so many times we have to start from, let me educate you about human rights and indigenous rights if it's an indigenous in the area, and tell you that you have rights. Let me start from that to build a relation. And that is something that sadly is happening, but we need to face it as a risk, and we need to face it a solution that we have to bring to the table. And this is not painting churches on getting computers for kids in the schools. This is bigger than that. Is the fear for communities that they cannot go to the justice system because they don't trust the justice system in their own countries. And it's exactly the same for the private sector. Say, well, I don't prefer not go to court here because number one, it's going to take 5-4 years to happen, and it's a lot of layers of corruption, so I don't want to go into that. So we are left solos. We are dancing solos with communities. So even more, we really need to do it right between both of us.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thanks. That was a really, really detailed answer. And not to get political, but I imagine this idea of having money in government is private money into government that doesn't do anything but complicate the situation.
Well, it makes things very complicated. And if you have regulators that, number one, this is another thing that makes it complicated, is that not many governments understand the industry. And this is an industry that I fall in love long time ago because I think that it has so much potential to do good at the grassroots. And to do good, not being philanthropic, do good out of work, do good out of the future, do good around principles and values around what is dignity of work. That is priceless from my angle. But the industry, not many people understand the industry, and that's another challenge.
Thank you so much, Monica and Rob. Filipa has a couple of questions, so I'm going to turn it on to her.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Monica and Rob. Yeah, one question is, in Europe, these ESG issues are quite harder to deal. The environmental issue is too sensitive, and the people follows the NIMBY politics, not in my backyard. And here I think most of the time the people don't see the direct return. So do you have any suggestions how the people like me that work in mineral exploration, and even for some companies, how we can deal with that?
Well, thank you, Filipa, and I appreciate your honesty in saying that. I think that one of the things that universities right now are waking up on bringing social science courses to geology and mining engineering. I'm part of the U of T working on that. But at the same time, it is also how, going back again to how transparent we want to be to engage our own people in our own knowledge. It's so much knowledge, Filipa, that is sitting with you guys, but you are not part of the discussion when it's social issues, for example. When I engage geologists to work with us on how we can create jobs locally, it is amazing how many jobs they come up and said, oh, I can have guys helping us here. I can have, we can even have elders helping from the community because, oh, they can help us to organize samples and things like that. So working together is what basically allows us to bring your knowledge from the geologist angle. And when we pose a question to you, and I bet you, Filipa, that if we are working together and I say, hey, Filipa, we need to create some jobs for elders here, you will scratch your head and say, hey, Monica, I can have these people working on this. And that sounds very simple, but it represents an income for a family and represents an opportunity of getting a yes from a community and represents less risk for Rob's angle and more investors happy to know that elders won't become an issue. So it is a point in which we are not working solo. It is a point in which we really need to engage you guys in the conversation. And that is happening a lot, sadly, in many companies, that you are not part of the management discussions in some cases. And that is an issue.
And it's probably the singular point of the session, that at the end of the day, 2 + 2 = 5 means geology and the tremendous expertise, the science, the wealth it creates, combined with social engagement, and how all of a sudden the two come together to be worth more than the sum of the parts. Because trust is hard. And someone with the NIMBY point of view is really saying, I have trust. And fair enough, so trust needs to be earned. And trust is dialogue, conversation, and the science that goes hand in hand with geology. And even from a finance point of view, it's one of the questions I know I've gotten from a few people is, so this is different than, let's say, a manufacturing process or a pure science process. It's touchy-feely social stuff. How do you monetize it? And the short answer is, no, it's not. It's a different kind of discipline. It's a different kind of science, but it's very disciplined stakeholder engagement and change management that leads to predictable outcomes. Because if the right work in good faith in a transparent based way is done, then people end up buying in and you come to a good place. If that work isn't done, then by definition, the outcome isn't quite as good. So it all comes together by working together more than anything.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I have another question, can I? It's for Rob. When you are mentioned your calculation parameters, you said that you don't use usually the price commodities because, of course, they are quite variable. But what I know here, at least in Portugal, a lot of junior companies depend on that to have the financial support to keep going the project. So how, do you have any comment or something about this?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when thinking about the economics of a mine, the price of the commodity, of course, is at the heart of the conversation. And projections around shifts in the price of the commodity are also part of the conversation. Folks think it'll get more expensive or it'll get cheaper. With this social engagement work, by definition, there's reduced risk of shutdown. So great, we're going to get more material out of the ground, and we're going to price it for economic purposes at the value of that given commodity. What I was suggesting before is that we're not going to dial in changes to the price of that commodity that result from the actual work we do around social engagement. So I don't know, if gold, for example, is worth $1,900 an ounce today, it's not going to be worth $2,500 because we're socially engaged. It's still going to be worth $1,900. So that's the basis of the economic modeling that we would use and start with.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I think it's really interesting to just to point towards Filipa's first question that the social contract in Europe is a lot harder. It's a lot different problem to get the social contract in Portugal from the public than it's a completely different problem than in, say, a developing nation or a place where there's no infrastructure and things like this.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And one of the points that we have to understand is that in the developing world, the infrastructure is there. The government has a strong infrastructure. So you see the lights, you turn on the lights, you open and you get fresh water. You put the garbage the day that they tell you, and you drive the roads that they drive for you. And your kids go to the school around the corner, and you don't pay for that school. When you go and mine here, obviously communities are much more aware of different risks and challenges. Jobs, this is one of the things that we need to be clear for the future. So many times the opportunity for mining and the acceptance was coming in a form of jobs. With automation, the jobs are going to be less and less. So we are not going to need 500 people. Probably we're going to need only 200 people to run a mine, or even less. So what are we going to present to the table? And that is goes straight to governance, where we were talking before, around the quality of management and governance and the engagement with all stakeholders. So in Europe, the discussion is different, the same as in Canada and North America and Australia. The discussion is very different when we talk about communities that already have access to satisfy basic needs. And that is an extra challenge for mining companies.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Thanks for that. We're getting towards the end of the time, but I'd like to also go back to a point you made about university involvement and how students, researchers can be involved. And to that, I'd like to turn to Alana, who has a question about from the university side.
Hi, thanks very much for your talk. It's really interesting. Yeah, so my question comes a little bit follow up on what was mentioned, but we're talking about so much in terms of other topics like climate change and things about education and really informing people of these issues. And one of the things that kind of strikes me is that when I went through my bachelor degree and the kind of other bachelor degrees I'm aware of for geologists, like there isn't a lot of teaching on these topics, and it seems like there should be. I just wondered if you're aware of some courses that are out there, or I know, for example, like there was this Responsible Raw Materials conference earlier this year that was fantastic and is a resource, but I just wonder if you're aware of other resources out there for.
Well, thank you so much. And I think that we need to do work on that. There are no many, sadly. And now you just mentioned climate change. And that is the new challenge for the industry, because we're gonna estimate to be less demand for fossil fuel, and we're gonna use more wind and solar, which means more mining. Are we ready for more mining in a world of conflict? That is huge. And sadly, you guys get all your knowledge in geoscience and you are thrown to the field and bang, what is happening here? And we need to move this from pubs and beers and talking to friends and fix the world to the classroom, and be a little bit more organized in education around what is social science. Because most of the time, the best conversation I have with geologists around beers and talking about the social component. And it is science, and that's the piece that we need to also recognize, that social is as technical. That has been, I said this in every ground I have, is as technical, as complex as any other science. It's not just touchy-feeling. And when you treat it touchy-feeling is when you had a Pascualama case or an Australia Rio Tinto case.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think you're definitely right.
Well, and anytime you guys want us to share or organize some training or something, please pick our brains. We need more people to know about this.
Thanks so much. I mean, I think one of the things that would be fantastic is to have some more involvement of like student chapters from the big societies. I mean, they're always looking for speakers and interesting topics. And I know that, I mean, I'm in Switzerland and there's not so much mining going on here, but there's a lot of students who are interested, but at the same time, they're a little bit put off because there's so much like negative press, and people are worried about the environment, and they don't realize that there are initiatives out there. And I think it would be really good to, I hope that this talk gets a lot of views on YouTube, and the student chapters start kind of taking action and yeah, informing their colleagues and peers, and yeah. So thanks very much.
No, you're welcome. Thank you for asking.
These kinds of online platforms like ours, but also the student chapters, are a lot more flexible, a lot more light on their feet than our university curriculums. So we can adapt quickly and see if they follow. Yeah. Yeah. Also, I'd just like to say thanks to Davey Carville, who's given me some great resources in the chat, but I don't know if he wants to speak up. He's not to put you on the spot, Davey, but I see you putting a couple of messages in there.
Thanks, Davey. No, I'll just sum up for him. He just wanted to let us know that there's a new open UK-based NGO called Geology for Global Development that's posting some of these type of ESG resources for the public to use. And he posted the link here in the chat. So I think for anyone who's interested, this Geology for Global Development is a really cool new project that you should check out. And we'll share that link with you, Monica and Rob, later.
Yeah, we would love to meet with them.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
So I think we're wrapping up now. I guess I'd like to leave this to you both. If you have any last comments, things you'd like to say, or where we can find you on social media. O-Trade, what is O-Trade up to?
O-Trade is up to a lot. And at the end of the day, you know, this is about geology and social science collaborating together to make the lives of people better. And it's measured by finance. So O-Trade is really, we're thinking about extending benefits as much as we can, given their core value. One of the things we're actually doing right now is releasing a white paper that talks to everything that we just talked about the last hour. It's how do we measure this stuff? What does it look like? What does it mean? And how do we drive behavior based on what the measuring tells us? Because one reality is if we don't measure, we don't act. And the second reality is acting is really important because it's both the health of our mining operations and also the dignity of people in the communities around the mining corporate operations. So for my part, I was thrilled to talk the last hour along with Monica. Thank you very much, guys.
Yeah, well, I joined Rob. Is so much that we're trying to do here. Thank you very much for opening space for this conversation to happen with a community that we admire a lot. We admire your work. We respect your work, and we see a great value in what you do to reshape the life of communities around the world. And we really want to continue working with you guys. It's nothing better than teaming up with geologists. We both are humble in understanding so many things, and we are both looking for the better good. So I think that the more opportunities to join efforts, the better. This was today, this time actually, even this event is quite an amazing experience. Working with you guys, it has been great. So thank you very much. And thank you for opening a window to weirdos who don't understand lots of geoscience and give us a space to share our story. That's fantastic. Thank you so much.